Do not interrupt me. Yes, I was happy, at least I believed myself to be so. I was pure, my soul was filled with limpid light. No head was raised more proudly and more radiantly than mine. Priests consulted me on chastity, doctors on doctrines. Yes, science was all in all to me. It was a sister to me, and a sister sufficed. But that with age other ideas came to me. More than once my flesh had been moved as a woman's form passed by. That force of sex and blood which in the madness of youth I had imagined and I had stifled forever had more than once convulsively raised the chain of iron vows which bind me, a miserable wretch, to the cold stones of the altar. But fasting, prayer, study, and the mortifications of the cloister rendered my soul mistress of my body once more. And then I avoided women. Moreover, I had to but open a book, and all the impure mists of my brain vanished before the splendors of science. In a few moments I felt the gross things of earth flee far away, and I found myself once more calm, quieted, and serene in the presence of the tranquil radiance of eternal youth. As long as the demons sent to attack me only vague shadows of women who passed occasionally before my eyes in the church, in the streets, in the fields, who had hardly recurred to my dreams, I easily vanquished them. Alas! If the victory had not remained with me, it is the fault of God who has not created man and the demon of equal force. Listen, one day I was leaning on the window of my cell. What book was I reading then? Oh, all that is a whirlwind in my head. I was reading. The window opened on a square. I heard a sound of a tambourine and music. Annoyed at being thus disturbed in my reverie, I glanced into the square. What I beheld, others saw beside myself, and yet it was not a spectacle made for human eyes. There, in the middle of the pavement, it was midday. The sun was shining brightly. A creature was dancing, a creature so beautiful that God would have preferred her to the Virgin, and have chosen her for his mother, and have wished to be born of her if she had been in existence when he was made man. Her eyes were black and splendid. In the midst of her black locks, some hairs through which the sun shone glistened like the threads of gold. Her feet disappeared in their movements like spokes of a rapidly turning wheel. Around her head, in her black tresses, there were discs of metal which glittered in the sun and formed a coronet of stars on her brow. Her dress, thick with the spangles blue and dotted with 1,000 sparks, gleamed like a summer night. Her brown, supple arms twined and untwined around her waist, like two scarves. The form of her body was surprisingly beautiful. Oh, what a resplendent figure stood out, like something luminous even in the sunlight. Alas, young girl, it was thou. Surprised, intoxicated, charmed, I allowed myself to gaze upon thee. I looked so long that I suddenly shuddered with terror. I felt that fate was seizing hold of me. Already half fascinated, I tried to cling fast to something and hold myself back from falling. I recalled the snares which Satan had already set for me. The creature before my eyes possessed that superhuman beauty which can only come from heaven or hell. It was no simple girl made with a little of our earth and dimly lighted within the vacillating ray of a woman's soul. It was an angel, but out of shadows and flame and not of light. At the moment when I was meditating thus, I beheld beside you a goat, a beast of witches, which smiled as it gazed at me. The midday sun gave him golden horns. Then I perceived the snare of the demon, and I no longer doubted that you had come from hell, and that you had come thence for my perdition. I believed it. I believe it still. Nevertheless, the charm operated little by little. Your dancing whirled through my brain. I felt the mysterious spell working within me. All that should have awakened was lulled to sleep, and like those who die in the snow, I felt pleasure in allowing this sleep to draw on. All at once you began to sing. What could I do, unhappy wretch? Your song was still more charming than your dancing. I tried to flee. Impossible. I was nailed, rooted to the spot. It seemed to me that the marble of the pavement had risen to my knees. I was forced to remain until the end. My feet were like ice. My head was on fire. At last you took pity on me. You ceased to sing. You disappeared. The reflection of the dazzling vision, the reverberation of the enchanting music disappeared by degrees from my eyes and ears. Then I fell back onto the embrasure of the window, more rigid, more feeble than a statue torn from its base. The vesper bell roused me. I drew myself up. I fled, but alas, something within me had fallen never to rise again. Something had come upon me from which I could not flee. Yes, dating from that day, there was within me a man whom I did not know. I tried to make use of all my remedies, the cloister, the altar, the work, books, follies. Oh, how hollow does science sound when one in despair dashes against it a head full of passions. Do you know, young girl, what I saw thenceforth between my book and me? You, your shade, the image of the luminous apparition which had one day crossed the space before me. But this image had no longer the same color. It was somber, funeral, gloomy as the black circle which long pursues the vision of the imprudent man who has gazed intently at the sun. Unable to rid myself of it, since I heard your song humming ever in my head, beheld your feet dancing always on my breviary, felt even at night in my dreams your form in contact with my own. I desired to see you again, to touch you, to know who you were, to see whether I should finally find you like the ideal image which I had retained of you, to shatter my dream, perchance, with reality. At all events, I hoped that a new impression would efface the first, and the first had become insupportable. I sought you. I saw you once more. Calamity! When I had seen you twice, I wanted to see you 1,000 times. I wanted to see you always. Then how stop myself on that slope of hell? Then I no longer belonged to myself. The other end of the thread, which the demon had attached to my wings, he had fastened to his foot. I became vagrant and wandering like yourself. I waited for you under porches. I stood on the lookout for you at street corners. I watched for you from the summit of my tower. Every evening I returned to myself more charmed, more despairing, more bewitched, more lost.